All right. First segment is what, 14?
About 14.
14. Okay. We'll go in 3, 2, 1. Welcome to Veterans Chronicles. I'm Greg Corumbus. Thank you for being with us. My guest at this time is Willie Woods, a veteran of the historic Montford Point Marines, the first all-African American unit ever created by the U.S. Marine Corps. He joins me now to tell his story and the significance of the Montford Point Marines. And Willie, it's great to have you with us. Thank you.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Let's start with your growing up years. Where were you born and where did you grow up? How did you eventually become interested in military service?
Well, I'm originally from South Carolina, small place called Chester, and I came to Washington, D.C. around 1932. Grew up in the lower northwest section of Washington, attended school in D.C. And basically, I just had a normal childhood life. I didn't do anything special. I loved sports, so we had neighborhood teams then, like your neighborhood, maybe you lived 3 or 4 blocks over from me, you would play our neighborhood. This was our entertainment for that time.
How old were you when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and what do you remember your reaction being as a young person?
Well, I was around about 16 or 17. And at the time that the attack took place, I was working at a pharmacy up on 14th Street. And I didn't know anything about Pearl Harbor or, because, well, that wasn't a part of my history. I didn't, I hadn't had any dealings with Pearl Harbor. But when the news came on the radio, everybody was saying the Japanese have attacked at Pearl Harbor, and I didn't really find out what it meant until the following day, when I came back. When I came home, I was a delivery boy at the pharmacy. You call up and order something, and I'd make the delivery. But I realized that, because the next day, President Roosevelt had said that we were going to war, and that's when it really, when it really became. I really knew what was going on, and when the president said that the United States was going to war with Japan. And from then on, it was just, I don't know, it was just, normal life, but things got a little different because of the war. Everything we had this rationing, every food was rationed, and gas was rationed. You had to get gas stamps in order to get gas. Well, it didn't make any difference to me because I didn't have a car anyway. But the food part, anyway, and you even had to get stamps to get shoes and so forth. But when I turned 18, I had to register for the draft. And that's when it really came, when it really hit me. I knew what was going on then, because I was anticipating going into the military, but yet I was skeptical of going into the military because some people went and didn't come back. And this part was kind of frightening, but I was excited that I had reached draft age and had my draft card in my pocket. But it was normal. It was nothing special about it, but just the thought of going to war. I was glad of one thing. I was glad that the war was being fought where it was. It wasn't here. We weren't affected, with the actual war itself. We were like on the sideline because we didn't have to face the war here. And that part of it, the only effect that I really had from that was, and we used to have blackouts. You would put screens, not screens, but black paper across your windows to keep the light out. And they had wardens, had what they call air raid wardens. It was just like a school practice of a fire drill. Only we did it from inside the house. You stayed inside rather than go outside. On the fire drills, you came out, but on these air raid drills, you closed the house up so that no light could be seen. I guess this was because if planes came over, they could see the light, and you would more or less be directing the planes to what way they could go. But it was to keep the light out, and during times like this, we didn't have TV or anything like that. We had radio. We'd be in the house, and the only thing that you could do was to listen to the radio or get a book and read. But most people cut the lights out in the house, even after they had put the cover up to the window to keep the light out, keep the light in, rather.
When you turned 18 and became eligible for the draft, were you already aware of the Montford Point Marines, and is that why you decided to join them, or how did you go about deciding?
No, well,
where to
there
serve?
was no Montford Point Marines until President Roosevelt signed that bill. I can't think of it. It was in '42 when he signed the bill that the Montford Point Marines would be established. And actually, the Marines were the Montford Point Marines. It was set up more or less as an experiment to see, well, I'll say the old Corps felt that the black Marines, not black Marines, but that the blacks were not really fit to be Marines. They felt that if we were pulled into the services, in fact, all the services were segregated at that time, but that was a way of life. But they felt that if we were brought into the military, that we wouldn't be able to carry out the function. We wouldn't be able to hold up to the high standards of the Marines. And now, that wasn't the reason I chose the Marine Corps. The real reason I chose Marine Corps, when I was drafted, the day I went down for induction, you had to go down for a pre-induction exam to find out if you were physically fit to go into the Marine Corps, or go into the services, really. But on the day that I went down, we had to go over to Baltimore to the Armory. The quota for inductees for the Navy was 17-1 for Army, and I don't think Marine Corps even had a quota, but it was 17-1 for the Navy, and I did not want to go in the Navy. I didn't want to go in the Navy because I didn't like the outfits they wore, and I wanted to go into the Army, but I figured if I opt for the Marine Corps, then I would probably get Army. I was trying to weigh my odds for getting into the Army. So I chose Marine Corps. And there were only two of us from DC who opted for the Marine Corps. And we were taken, and there was one from Baltimore, and we were taken to this colonel's office. He was the inductor, the one who gave us our induction exam and whatever. But he was old Corps, and he was hard old Corps. He was determined, to me, it seemed, to tell us that we didn't want to go in the Marine Corps. That was a bad choice. There was no invitation to come on, you're welcome. The whole thing seemed to be you were being pushed aside, pushed off, and given information that would try to kind of pull your spirits down. But we looked at each other and listened to him. And when he had finished his little induction speech, he asked us, "Do you still want to go?" And we told him yes. So there were 3 of us at that time that had chosen the Marine Corps, and we became Marines at that time. And we had a chance to come back home that night and report back to the Army the next day. And then we were given orders. This was received, but the first orders we would receive were from, we got written orders to take us to catch a train at Union Station and go to Richmond, Virginia, and then from there we caught a bus to Warsaw, North Carolina. And from Warsaw, North Carolina, we went to the Marine base at Montford Point. Now, I had never heard of Montford Point until that time. In fact, the first I'd heard of it was when the colonel said you'd be going to Montford Point, and to me that was just a name, you know. But we went, and during that time, segregation was everywhere. There was everywhere you went, you saw signs that directed you to where they had signs colored and white, or colored not wanted in here, you know, colored not served here, something of that sort. But anyway, we went to Warsaw. We had a little wait over in Warsaw to wait for the bus to come to take us on to Montford Point. And now the DC was segregated too. You might as well admit it. But it wasn't something that would hit you in the face every day, because you lived in your area and other people lived in their area, and the two never really came together to, you know, for anything, I'll say disagreements to come up. But when we got to Warsaw, it was early in the morning, and we had picked up one more fellow in Richmond from, I think it was Natural Bridge, Virginia. He was from Natural Bridge, Virginia. We'd picked up one more Marine from Natural Bridge, and there were now 4 of us. And when we got to Warsaw, we were hungry. So the bus driver showed us where we should go to wait to get something to eat. It was a place not as big as this room here, where they had a potbelly stove in the middle of the floor and benches on the side, around 2 sides of the room. And in the front of the room, there was a window about maybe 1.5 foot square, where you could order food from inside what seems to be a drugstore. And well, back then at that time, they had the counters where you go in and you could get the drugstore. Well, drugstores were hangouts for kids anyway. But we had to order from back behind. In fact, you couldn't even see in the place good. You could see that it was set up. It was pretty nice over there compared to what was on this other side. But we ordered food, and I don't know if they had any hot sandwiches or not, but our sandwiches were cold. And then we waited for the bus, and from there we went to North Carolina, to Montford Point, North Carolina, where it was just outside of Jacksonville.
Well, sir, let's take a pause there. We're talking with PFC Willie Woods, a member of the historic Montford Point Marines. I'm Greg Corumbus. This is Veterans Chronicles. We'll be right back.